From multiple global locations in Minneapolis and beyond, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development. I'm Ellen Burns-Johnson, and I make nice games.
I'm Steven McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy. I, too, make nice games.
In this episode, we talk with Ryan Sumo to talk about developing games in the Philippines. And so, if everyone is ready,
let's start.
Hello! Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ryan Sumo, and I make nice games.
Awesome. I love it.
A dear listener, of course, the lag for all the way around the world is responsible for that delay. So Ryan,
Yeah.
Perfect. Nailed it.
Exactly.
Great timing.
The music had to go all the way through the tubes.
Yep, exactly right.
Yeah, Ryan, you're in the Manila in the Philippines right now, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. It's late for us. It's like 9 p.m. and it's 10 a.m. over there, it was kind of complicated to get the time that worked for us, but we made it work.
Yeah. Thank you for adjusting.
You know, we at Nice Games Club are going to have to get used to doing more of these because, Ryan, you sort of just sent us an email and said, hey, I've heard of your show. I'd love to be on it. And we were like, we've never talked to anyone that far away. We should be doing more of that. And so you sort of inspired us to, especially now that we're all, we are within just a few miles of each other, but it really is we're just as close as we are to each other as we are to you in an era where everyone is doing these things remotely. And so it's to sort of make sense. Like we should be doing more guests from far away. And so you're our first from as far away as you are. So thanks for that.
Thank
anyway.
you. Well, actually, that's exactly why I started reaching out to people. I realized like all of my social interaction, like for the past couple of months, has been through like video screens. So why the heck not like talk to people from around the world? So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
We're
reaching out.
all one community now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true. It's very true. So I want to know, like, what is it like to develop games in the Philippines? I feel like I haven't heard a lot about the game dev scene there, and I'd like to hear from you.
So the community is kind of small. I mean, comparatively small. It's been growing for quite some time. I think I've been in it for around 15 or more years, maybe. So like at the time that I was starting out, there was like kind of almost nothing. There was maybe one company that was putting out like original content, and most of the work was making like small games for like old cell phones. Like I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with like the Nokia cell phones from back in the day. Just very basic stuff.
Legendary.
Yeah.
They never break, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a market that we don't really have in America. Like we don't really have that market here, but in places in the East, including Japan, like those sort of like feature phone games survived for quite a while. I'm not sure so much anymore, but for quite a while.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they did. So the market was very weird. Like the way it worked, like there was nothing like the App Store or anything like that. So you would sell like directly to like the telco companies, and then like they give you a cut. So like a lot of people complain now about Steam's like 30/70 cut, and I complain about it too. Let's be honest. But like back in the day, like the cut was more like 70 to the like the telco companies and 30% to the developers. So
wow,
it's a nice change.
Yeah.
But yeah, now like these days it's hard for me to quantify. I forget the numbers, but there is an industry here. A lot of it is like outsourcing.
Okay.
So we like the Philippines is pretty well known for like outsourcing for like call centers. I used to work in a call center for a while, and now like there are companies like Naughty Dog that like they outsource like some of their work here, and so there's a bunch of outsourcing companies. And but recently there's quite a few like smaller indie like studios like ours that are starting to pop up and like just put out some original content.
Okay.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Ryan, would you mind giving us kind of like a tour of your career, how you got started and where you went then? And
a
brief overview of those 15 years. The Wayback Machine.
Oh boy. So like I started out, so I was working in a call center and I just like answered an ad for like this small company that was making like these mobile games. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the Game and Watch, like from Japan, like those very like LED. Yeah. So there was like it was that like kind of simplistic kind of game, and so yeah, I answered that like who didn't want to do like who didn't want to work on games, and it was like kind of cool. And that company went under in like I don't know 8 months. So I switched to another company that was also working on mobile games, and it went under in around like 7 to 8 months. There's kind of a pattern here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of just jumped from one like company to another. But like to get to where I am right now, probably started from someone saw my portfolio on DeviantArt like maybe 10 years ago, and he was working on a DS game. So this was a guy that had previously worked at Sega. We were working on a DS game, so he hired me like to work on the game for a year. And then 2008, like the financial crisis happened, and no one was publishing games, so he had to let me go. And from that point on, I had put money down on a condominium, and so I was paying a mortgage.
Oh boy!
And so I lost that job, and I was like, well, I'm kind of screwed now. So I figured I would try my hand at like freelance art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like so this was the time of 2008 maybe, I think, was when the Apple like App Store was starting to like kind of blow up, and everyone wanted to be a millionaire by making like an Apple like an iPad like an iPhone game. And so there was a lot of work for freelance artists then. Like I just built up my portfolio over time up to the point where I was starting to get some actual clients like coming to me. And like my big break probably was a game called Space Chem. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with that game. It was by Zachtronics.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, I definitely have heard of it.
Yeah.
So Space Chem was kind of like you're kind of rearranging molecules, and it was a very, very like programmer-centric game, and it was very appealing to a lot of like game developers. And so this came out like when Steam was still pretty young, and like getting on Steam was still the golden ticket. So it kind of blew up. That led to like the guys from Introversion Software who made Prison Architect saw Space Chem, and they liked the art, and then like they emailed me out of the blue asking if I would be interested in working with them. And so Prison Architect is kind of its own like story. That kind of blew up. When Prison Architect launched, I figured that was kind of the peak of my career as a freelance artist, and I figured it made sense to start a studio and start putting out our own content. So that's kind of
Cool.
how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, I can't even imagine like running my own studio at this point. I like how your trajectory made sense at the time. Like you could tell like it was time for you to start your own studio and do your own things.
And being able to recognize that moment is tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was an opportunity. It just like just a confluence of things. Like I was working on a game on the side just for fun with a friend almost at the same time that Prison Architect launched, and like we had both decided like, oh well, maybe we should pitch this to publishers and see if anyone's interested. And then Prison Architect launched at this big event in the UK called EGX. And they flew me over and that was the first time I'd met them. So they flew me over for the launch, and I was like, well, I'm going to be at this big game event. There's going to be publishers there. Maybe I should pitch the game to them. And so I basically used like their invitation to bring me over there and to just hunt down some publishers. And we found one, and that's kind of how the company started.
Yeah, that's what those events are for, right?
Yeah.
Is to connect people.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, it sounds like from your description that the game dev scene in the Philippines has really changed over the last 10 years. It's probably changed everywhere, but I'm curious, like, how did it grow with you? Like, where are some of the communities, and how's the game dev scene in the Philippines evolved with you, and what is it like now?
Yeah, there were always like people, I guess, like trying to grow the community. There's a bit of a divide, though, not like an angry divide, but like there's a kind of a divide between like the companies that are more, I guess, like business oriented and like looking for contracts for outsourcing and stuff. And so they started an organization called GDAP, the Game Developers Association of the Philippines. And so that's been going on for quite some time, actually. And so like they work with government and like they do like these like visits or tours of different countries and stuff, and like basically trying to do business matching and stuff like that. So that's like kind of the more corporate side. And at some point I was kind of involved with that. And then, but I'm kind of business oriented, but I'm kind of straddling the line between like interested in business, but also interested in like art, I guess.
You sort of have to be, right?
Yeah. So at some point I tried to help like kind of rejuvenate the IGDA. It's weird. I think the IGDA is not really meant to be like community building in that sense. But I kind of used it to kind of like rally like the local community around game dev, and like we would do like monthly meetups where it was mostly just like kind of a way for the community to get together and like exchange ideas. Yeah, like I was doing that for 3 years. We did like the first game jam in 2010. Like we joined the global game jam for the first time in 2010.
Awesome.
And ever since then, we've been doing that on an annual basis. And when I left, like it was great to see that after I left, like kind of other people picked up like where I left off, and it's still going pretty strong. There's a pretty big like IGDA Philippines community on Facebook.
That's super cool. I mean, because like I can think of many instances in my own life where a personality was the thing that carried a community forward. And when that personality has left, then the community kind of withers. But you've done something strong. Like, you've built something strong where when you can change your role or you can take a step back and it continues on its own. That must have been really satisfying.
Yeah. It was great. And also I was just tired. Like after 3 years of
fair enough. Yeah.
It was like, well, I mean, if it falls to pieces, then I've failed, but I can't go on anyway. So like it's not like I could have kept going on.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that.
A lot of us will, the model you describe of like using IDGA local chapter as a way to rally a smaller indie community. That's a model that works pretty well for us here in Minneapolis, but also in places that aren't huge industry centers. Whereas a place like San Francisco, like their IDGA chapter has different priorities. And so their indie scene is different.
Yeah, it's like your rights and stuff like that.
Yeah. It is interesting that you want to build community, but not so that you become a pillar of the community. You build community so that there's a community for you.
Right.
So it's not everyone's goal to be in charge of it, right? They just want to build the resources so that they themselves can have the resources. And so which is kind of ultimately good for, so there isn't, there's no fiefdoms, like everyone's in it for each other. Right. And so that means that, you're not there to run it forever. Right.
So actually, my co-founders, Marnell, and Tristan, I met them through IGDA, specifically like through the meetups and through the game jams. That's kind of how I because I never worked with them before. At least I got an idea of like what they were interested in and what they were doing, like through the game jams and the kind of games that they were pitching. So like in that sense, it's definitely had a really big like impact on my life.
Yeah, the resources and the talent, and I think there's just so much that comes from a community of practice or a community of artists. Professional community, and how they kind of all intermix and all those different focuses intermix and interweave. It's really just irreplaceable. So I'm curious, like, do you have any advice for other people in smaller communities to get something like that started?
Don't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times at the start where I heard like literally some of the larger companies were telling their employees not to attend the meetings.
Wow.
Partly I think because like they were worried that like people would like share secrets, or like maybe people would be pirated. Yeah, and I'd heard sometimes like some people who I consider like kind of like friends now at the time were saying like, why is he organizing this stuff? So it can be very, because I was nobody, right? Like, I just wanted to like build this community. So just don't give up and don't be discouraged. It will be a long and hard road. Like find a couple of people who share your vision, I guess, your idea of like what the community can be, and then just rely on those people.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say what I like about that story is that it is a perfect model for people, because we get this at our IGG meetings a lot, which is someone says like, oh, I've been interested in games and game development for years, but I had no idea this existed.
Right.
And that's like our fault for not like getting the word out. But also the idea of like, oh, I thought that I needed to go to some higher authority for this sort of thing. For people who join a community that started by people like them, it is so encouraging. You get people who will show up to a meeting and then suddenly they'll start proposing ideas and they'll start, coming up with events of their own.
Right.
And other ways to grow the community, because they're not looking to someone 4 or 5 levels up for permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you weren't. It's
right.
like you do it because you can do it and no one else is doing it. And so I think it can light the fire,
Yeah, that's kind of in line with what I was going to say. I actually like the part of your story when you said like there were people saying, "Who the heck is this guy?" Like, this guy's the one who's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, you might have more experience than him, or you work for a company that everyone recognizes, but those people weren't the ones putting the meetings together. The responsibility falls to the people who show up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I think it also helps that like when you're younger and dumber and like I can't imagine. Could I do that now? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very specific moment in time where I had like more energy than I knew what to do with. So yeah.
Yeah, there are some benefits to being younger and stupider. Although I do feel like maybe I'm just going to a devil may care attitude faster than the average person. But
yeah, that's good. It's good.
I don't know.
Yeah, there are benefits of age and wisdom, but there are benefits to the opposite also.
Yeah.
Are there benefits to age and not wisdom?
Yeah. Just like, just make sure you're, leveraging the unique tools you have in that moment in time, right? Like you may not know anything, but that's power.
Right. That's 100%
yes.
true. That is 100% true. Like the older you get, like the more stuff that you know, like the more stuff that you know can hold you back. And when you're young and dumb and you don't know anything, it's like, well, I just nothing can stop me. Right. That's a huge deal. Yeah.
And then when something does stop you, like you ignore it and keep going.
Exactly.
Which if you're smarter, that you'll let it.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's some virtue to being stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Just the trick is to be just dumb enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Only there were a way to measure that. Like,
if only.
So I wanted to ask, how do you like sell your games in the Philippines? I guess you had brought up that like in the past there were a lot of mobile games that were being developed there, and I guess they're a bit of a market there still. But I want to know. I mean, you were describing that a little bit before we started recording, like your efforts in promotion and stuff. I'd like to hear more about that.
So within the Philippines itself, it's not really a great market for like specifically for like PC games or console games, and that's just because we're poor. So like when I was in high school, like pirated games were just stocked as if they were normal games, right? So I would go into a game store and they would have like a pile of pirated games. Like it was so prevalent that like I actually had a favorite pirate brand, and like so they had their own logos. So like my favorite pirate brand was called Players. And like I like them partly because they also like kind of pirated the logo of the Indiana Pacers basketball team, but instead of Pacers it said Players, and so I was like, huh?
Oh wow!
I trust these guys.
They're serious.
Yeah. They're committed to their craft. So I'm like, there's a very like I like for a time when like I kind of thought about being a journalist. I felt like there was a real story somewhere there about like discovering like these pirate networks and like how they operate and stuff. Like I still think that would be a very interesting story. But anyway, I digress. So there's a culture of like buying pirated games, which exists up to now. Like I even like I've had these like uncomfortable like conversations with like people like my age. Like I kind of I kind of excused myself for buying pirated games when I was a kid because I didn't know any better and like I couldn't afford it. So like whatever. But like there are some people like my age now who are whatever, like successful professionals, and like they'll like openly tell me, hey, I bought this pirated game, and I was like, dude, like you know what I do? That's not cool. Like you shouldn't be telling me this. Like I mean, you can keep doing it, but at least try to hide it. So back to the market. So there exists a market like for pirated games, and so like trying to sell like a PC game here it's no recipe for success, just because there's not a lot of people either able or willing to buy the game. That's changed actually somewhat over the years. We've been pleasantly surprised, like when we go to local conventions, like this really sweet guy, like we were selling our game like at a 50% discount, I think, because like we just wanted to encourage people to buy like local games and stuff. And like he's like, no, please take like I want to give you the whole price. Like I want to give you 100% of the cost of the game because you guys, whatever, like you deserve it and we want to support you. So that's been very encouraging. Yeah. In general, like our goal is like not to market games locally, but like globally, really. So a lot of our marketing outreach is like to the US, to Europe, and even like to other markets like Japan. And that's how we're able to survive. And at the same time, we try to work with the local community. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to survive if we tried to depend on the local community. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Just not big enough.
I think that's probably similar to smaller markets like us here in the Twin Cities. I don't think anyone ever would. I mean, partly because we're a U.S. state, so we have the United States as our home territory, so we don't think about it in the same terms. I think when I think about our community and developing games, I think about supporting the developers in our community, but I'm not really that concerned who plays my games. Right. I suppose. Like I'm not I'm not particularly interested in Minnesotans playing. I mean, maybe if I think about it, that'd be nice, but it's not really something I'm interested in as a marketing angle necessarily. But I think the exceptions are as you described, like local events, like selling Steam codes on a piece of paper or something at a convention. Like there's something about selling locally that is nice, but isn't the main aim. Right. I mean, the whole market, the whole industry is global, right? Like gamers don't really care where the game they bought was made either. Yeah.
There's so like I attended a talk before where like an entrepreneur was like talking about like, there's a lot of like companies or whatever that kind of trump up the fact that this game or this object or this business or something was made in the Philippines. And that's great, like that's, it's good to have like local pride and to be proud of yourself and where you come from, but that no one cares. Yeah. No one in the world like really cares. So just like his advice is just focus on making a good product and then say like, hey, we're from the Philippines. And then that will change like the perception of people about the stuff that comes out of the Philippines.
Yeah, you can once they've got a game they love, then they can take that love and then give it to other people from that region. Right. But you can't expect them, even if they are local, right? You can't expect them to have any particularly love unless you prove it to them at first, right? So that's a longer process.
I hadn't really thought about like the relationship between local development and then global audience in the same way before. That's really fascinating, though. Tell us a little bit more about some of the conferences that you were just mentioning. I'm assuming those are local conferences in the Philippines.
I mean, RIP game conferences, I guess. It's kind of nice, but also kind of sad because like conferences are really exhausting.
Oh gosh,
very much. So
you also kind of miss the energy.
Also true.
There's a big conference here called EGX. EGX. That's the one in the UK. It's called ESGS. I don't know what ESGS stands for. something.
We'll put it in the show notes for you.
Electronic sports and gaming something. Yeah, so that's like the biggest, probably the biggest local event. So we're always there. So yeah, and every year there's like an indie, like it's called the Indie Fiesta. So there's like a small block of it that's devoted to indie games. That's run by a lady called Gwen Foster. So she's like one of the very active local like cheerleaders for the community. And yeah, so that's kind of where we would go locally. And regionally, we've been to events like Level Up in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and that's been nice. One of my favorite like conferences is Bit Summit in Japan. So I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but like that's been going on for like around 5, 6, I think maybe 7 years already. And that's one of that's pretty cool because like Japan is like one of my favorite places. And it's only like 4 hours away from us actually, so like it's relatively close, and it's a great like Bit Summit itself was a great mix of like Japanese developers and other Asian developers and like people from the US and Europe also flying in. So that's been like I've met a lot of really cool people there. Yeah, and we've gone to the US a couple of times also. It's not my preference just because of the distance.
Yeah.
And also the cost of tickets. But we've done PAX. I like PAX a lot actually as an event. I don't know if you guys have ever gone, but like as just an event for like a gamer or like someone interested in games. They've got some really, really good talks.
That was my experience too. I went last year. No, 2 years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago. And yeah, that was my experience. Like it was a cool event. It felt like such a spectacle. Just to be there.
I always feel like now that I'm, in games, I feel like I'm never going to be able to go to one of these events as a consumer. I mean, I can. There's nothing stopping me from doing that other than, the current state of the world. But absent that, I feel like I'm never going to want to spend like a whole week traveling and going to an event just to play Nintendo demos or walk around the show floor. I'm not going to let myself do that anymore. It's too late for me. It's like, oh no, I missed out on all that fun. Because PAX does seem way better for attendees than it does for exhibitors.
So we were talking a little bit about, you mentioned like one of the, you have been going to that conference every year except for this year. And I think that sparked us thinking about what kind of changes you've seen in your workflow as a result of COVID-19.
It's not really. So Squeaky Wheel, our company, we mostly work from home.
Yeah.
So previously what we would do was we'd work in like 2-week sprints. That's like agile development talk. So we work in 2-week sprints and we would meet like once every 2 weeks just as a like have a face-to-face, do the meetings, like some things are just easier like to like do hand gestures in front of each other and point to stuff. Do those kinds of discussions, and then we'd usually like play board games and have dinner afterwards. And so the only thing that's changed really is that the board games are now digital, and like all the interactions are now through Zoom. To be honest, it's not really affected us hugely in terms of like production. We're mostly like, we feel like #blessed that we can work from home, and we're still making money. Like people are still buying games, and so like we've definitely we put some thought into like donating as much money as we can to like local COVID related issues, just because we know that we have it so much better than everyone else.
That's beautiful.
That is beautiful. It's good to hear that kind of your setup hasn't changed in terms of events. Although I am sad that you aren't able to have dinner together. That bums me out.
So in events, like we're right now looking at like a lot of these events are becoming like digital only, right? So that's something we're exploring right now and like kind of seeing. It seems like an opportunity, right? Because at least now like you can kind of join an event and you don't actually have to be present and like have all those expenses. So that's something we're definitely exploring, like in terms of like finding like exposure, and like I guess like podcasts like this are also part of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like there are maybe the opportunities for community building and customer relationship and marketing and all those kinds of things that events were always so great at. Maybe the opportunities now are not as strong, but there is probably going to be many more of them, and access to them is going to be greater and more widely distributed.
Right.
So a lot of the longtime complaints about events like GDC, now that more of those things are online, maybe they're not as good, but more people can benefit from them, and over time maybe we'll find a balance where we'll take all the good things we learned in this time and apply them in the after times. Right. Here's hoping.
Yeah, post-COVID.
Yep. We talk about it like it's a real thing, but like we don't want to like jinx it, right?
Right. Knock on wood and all that.
We're all counting on it, we're all expecting it, but no one's really. No one's going to put I'm definitely keeping my October plans. Like, no one's there.
Yeah,
yet.
no, that's really weird.
Right.
My wife and I actually had plans to go to Spain in March, end of March, early April. And that was exactly when everything started to blow up. And so okay. Like there was like a week or two of me just like trying to cancel everything I could and see if I could get refunds. It's so weird to like not know or not be able to plan for the future.
Yeah. And then it's beneficial for people who work the way we all do, that we are able to adapt.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's no trouble now or ahead, but it's interesting.
So, you might have heard of this thing called Twitter.
Twitter? What?
Yeah, I might
heard
have
of
heard that.
Twitter.
It's a place where you go to tweet. If you feel like tweeting, you do it on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else I can do that?
Nope, it's the only place you can tweet.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay. Tell me more about this Twitter.
You can also follow people and get cool news and content.
But who would I follow of all the people?
You would follow the Nice Games Club Twitter account at Nice Games Club.
Okay.
Tell me on it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens on this Twitter account, let me tell you. And that's because Dale runs it. Dale is really cool. Dale makes great jokes, and Dale often tweets pictures of cats on our Nice Games Club.
Right. We didn't ask her to do that, but she's doing that.
That's good leadership.
Yes, that's true.
Which we'll talk about in the next episode. But like, if you see a need and you fill it, and that's what Dale did.
Filled that need with cats.
Filled the need with cats. So here's an example of a recent tweet. Dale said, "Debug is when you take insects out of the washing machine."
True. It's true fact.
Yes.
And this is an angle on game development you're not going to get anywhere else. It's really unique. So if you are on Twitter, or if you'd like to explore the Twitterverse, start with Nice Games Club at Nice Games Club on Twitter.
In your email that you sent us,
my self-promotional email.
What's that?
My openly self-promotional cold email where I asked if I could be a guest on the show. Yeah.
To be honest, I was impressed with the email. It's a weird thing to say, I guess, but
you were impressed by the balls on this guy.
Just the temerity.
But you mentioned like being transparent about being a game dev, and I wanted to ask you like what that means to you, and I guess what that means for the greater game dev community.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like misinformation about game development, right? I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about everything, like fake news,
right?
Like you're never going to be able to like teach everyone or inform everyone about like the realities of game development and like what the costs are and everything. And so a lot of people like they just choose not to deal with it, I guess. Like a lot of game developers, like there's a lot of like F players sometimes, and like some of the indie like game dev communities I kind of swim in. There's a weird like antagonism towards players, like because like like they sometimes like spread stuff that's like not true about like, oh, these like lazy devs and $1 million like devs, and so that creates a lot of weird like tension. Like in some way, like I guess just the way I'm wired is I don't want to think of my players in that way. I don't think it's healthy. So like I just try to spread as much information as I can out there about like like how much does a game developer really earn. It does make me a little bit nervous sometimes because like you can be misinterpreted even though you try as best as you can to be clear and like explain everything. You can still be misinterpreted. So like I think I linked you guys to an article that I think Simon Carlos did. Like I shared some of our like financial information with him, and so basically like technically we've Squeaky Wheel as a company has made like over $1 million, right? And that sounds like amazing, right? Like, oh, you're a millionaire right now, right?
Yeah.
But then like I broke down like, okay, so like 30% of that gross goes to Steam. And Steam is just like the marketplace. Like, go Humble, go Epic, go whatever, but like it's not even close. So like 30% of that revenue goes to Steam. We have like 2 like investors in the game that help fund the game. So 20% of the game's revenues go to them. There's a pretty sizable chunk that goes into like taxes and like other like overhead. Like we just started, like we paid for Unity licenses because like we'd gone over like the Unity like indie cap thing. And yeah, and then it's like three years worth of development. So like you kind of chop up all of that, and then what's left is like a relatively like small amount. So, and as a company, we do like a profit sharing thing where like depending on how long you've been with the company, and like there's like a percentage of profits above like our minimum level that we need to operate for a year that we just distribute to everyone in our small company. So yeah, so like I like being able to explain these things so that at least there's maybe one more person. I don't know how many people read it. I don't know how many people like kind of absorbed it, but at least there's 1 or 2 people out there who won't be mouthing off about lazy devs and like, like rich devs or whatever. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes.
It's
one changed mind at a time.
Yeah, it can be very exhausting. It can be very exhausting. Yeah.
Well, it's that culture of secrecy that I think that comes from the top of the industry that ends up meaning that like, yeah, your average gamer is like saying like, oh, this game for $15, it looks pretty good. That developer, must be swimming in it. And I don't feel bad about negative attitudes towards them. And when they go out and say, oh, we're having trouble, or when they raise their price, or when they don't participate in the summer sale or whatever, like it's so easy to have that intent. And it's not entirely the gamer's fault because they just don't have the information in front of them. And so that's why like, you publishing and posting that information is really valuable, not just for us devs to see how other devs do it, but for gamers to see like, this is people just make getting by, right?
If you think about it, break it down. Like, why, of all the things that a lazy person could choose to do with their time, why would they choose game development?
Oh, yeah. For real, though. That's a very good point.
I mean, there's a reason that we're exploited for our passion, right? So, like, I mean, it helps us, like, honestly, like, obviously there are some benefits to us, right? Like, being open about this stuff is kind of a form of marketing. It's like, oh, like this is these are the transparent devs, these are the honest devs, whatever. And like being open about these things also kind of humanizes us to our players. And I haven't received a death threat yet, so
that's good.
From my perspective, it's working.
right.
So far.
Yeah, it's a way to engender support amongst your player base in a way that is honest.
Yeah.
They'll cut you some slack. They'll maybe they'll be interested in a full priced game, and just like that story of that person at that local convention. Like they want to pay full price because they believe in you. And anything that can get a gamer to believe in you, it's voodoo, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a personal connection rather than a market connection, right? A market connection is a sale.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But like knowing that there's a person who made the thing that you love, and like wishing them good.
Right.
That's why I want to be a part of the game dev community. Like it's why I engage like in any art is for that human connection. Sounds like good work you're doing.
Thank you.
Ellen, your voice is like it sounds like good work, but it's tough work.
Well, yeah. I mean, like Ryan kind of said that a little bit ago too. Like, first of all, developing a game is hard.
Yes.
And then going out and changing.
I'm just learning
Here we are. It's 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, and we're just talking. We're making a podcast about the game. We're not even doing the game part. Anyway, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you put, your heart and your soul into the thing that you've made, and you know that it's not necessarily going to make you the next Bill Gates or whatever, but you do it anyway. And to have people accuse people like us of being lazy because of something, it can cut. It can be tough, and getting through that and continuing the work despite that kind of personal feeling criticism is exhausting. Totally
I have
get it.
been on the end of that. So like I have been like in positions like where I'm like reading reviews or like on Reddit or whatever, where I've just sat in front of my monitor and like my keyboard and like, do I respond? In general, I don't like. I'm totally fine if like people say that the game is bad, because that's just a matter of opinion, right? Like, it'll work for you or it won't work for you. That's fine. But like, what really gets my goat is like when someone insinuates that like we were like lazy or not working hard enough. I'm like, dude, like my dude. Like I had to tell everyone that we shouldn't stop working on weekends. Like this is not healthy. Just to lead by example, I'm like, I'm just not going to work on weekends. You guys can keep working, but like, I'm telling you not to work. Find like, whatever, like other non-gamey stuff to do. Because like we already push ourselves like harder than we have to, and so like anytime like someone insinuates that we're lazy, like I guess that's when I respond. I'm like, I just say, hey, you know what, just say that you don't like the game. That's fine. But don't call us lazy, because like it's just not true and it's insulting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that example you said is good too, because if someone's working, if they're crunching to satisfy the person who's calling them lazy, it's just a fool's errand. It'll never happen, right? I mean, if you're, like people crunch for lots of reasons, and there's debate about what's, how many of those are legitimate reasons, which I think we'd all agree that list is incredibly small. But certainly nowhere near it is to satisfy your critics on Reddit, right?
Yeah.
So, speaking of work, I'd like to hear a little bit from you, Ryan. I want to hear you talk a little bit about some of the games you've been involved in making and what's coming up next for you.
So right now we're working on a game called Academia School Simulator, and that's the game that I sent to you guys. And that's like a school builder. So like you like build, operate, and manage a school. Like you hire the teachers, you hire the janitors, and try to make sure that the kids pass their exams and go to prestigious universities. So that's what we've been working on for like the past 3.5 years, roughly. And it's still in early access. We're hoping to release it sometime this year, like version 1. So that's something to look forward to. And at the same time, we're so like part of the community building thing that we were talking about before. I was very excited when I found that there were other indie PC studios that are popping up here, and like I found one just really randomly on Twitter. Like I was just looking through my Twitter, and I saw this game that looked interesting. That their address was like .ph. It was a .ph address. I'm like, oh, that's Philippines. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so like I dug in a little bit deeper, and I found out that they live here. And I visited that team, and I really liked the game that they're working on. And like we just kind of built a relationship, and then eventually last year we we agreed that Squeaky Wheel would publish their game, and now that game is called Ruin Arc, and that should be hitting. Fingers crossed, it should be hitting Steam Early Access in August 2020. So that's definitely something that we'd like you guys to check out. It's imagine that you are, if you're familiar with RimWorld, like imagine you are the storyteller in RimWorld and you're just like wreaking havoc on people's lives. That's kind of the basic idea of the game.
So like My Usual Tuesday.
Sounds like a game for you then.
Perfect.
So you became a publisher almost by accident, it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, like we're not like that's not really in our DNA, right? There are people who go out there and like their goal is just to be a publisher. That's great. Like they're out there regularly scouting for games. But like for us, it was more like and for the team also at I forgot how to pronounce their team's name, like Maxima. It's Maccima. But anyway, so like for the guys, it was also like they were looking for publishers from like around the world also, but there is a sense of trust. I mean that goes back to like the transparency thing, right? So like because we're transparent with how we go about things, and we've built like a sense of trust with them. And of course, it helps that like you can do a face-to-face with them. They literally like work in a condo that's like 5 minutes away from where my parents live. And so like there was just one time where I visited my parents to have dinner, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna go like meet these guys, and I walked over, and that's how I first met them. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was and that kind of like goes like full circle, I guess, with the community building. It's like now we started just like meeting up every month, and now like I'm in a position where we can actually fund another studio, and that was a really great feeling for me.
And so was moving into that new sector, the new business sector, was that really purely a matter of you just happened upon the perfect first game to do it with, or was it more about the team itself, or was it something that in the back of your mind you're like, I'd love to do this, and you were searching?
No, I mean, it was just kind of like what we were talking about earlier, right? Just like the opportunity like kind of presented itself. Like it was just so random. It felt so random that like serendipitous even. It just felt like it was so we had to do something. I mean at the start I wasn't like pitching to them really hard that like, oh, we want to publish a game. We were like, if I had some contacts in like with like the wider like publishing community, I've even like somehow managed to get some conversations with like Paradox Interactive, and I think this is a kind of game that they might be interested in, and so I was definitely like offering to hook them up with like with different publishers. Like my goal was just to make sure that they finished this game and like put it out there, and whether or not we were directly involved in that, like as a publisher or just as as friends, like helping them out. It didn't really matter to me.
Okay.
I mean, I hope it makes us money because we did put in a bit of money, so I do hope it's successful.
Yeah.
We never don't hope that it makes money, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, there's something sort of appealing about that story for a potential customer, right? It's like this game was so interesting that it got someone into this business, right? Into this part of the business. I think that's a story I think that will appeal to people, right? And it serves your philosophy of sort of transparency as a marketing tool, right?
It's something interesting about, for me at least, and maybe for others, but as someone who does like to support community, like local game dev communities and local art communities, there's something really cool about how close you guys were in location. And I wonder, like that's not going to happen between me and someone in like Pennsylvania on the other side of the country, right? And oftentimes people forget that Minnesota's a state because we're in the middle of flyover country. We're not on the East Coast. We're not on the West Coast. We're just kind of in the middle of the continent where the planes pass. Even though like we've all made a connection because Ryan emailed us from the other side of the world. I wonder if the fact that you guys were like in the Philippines and you are a smaller community kind of like broke down some of the barriers that would normally be in place. with people who are from different, like just different companies? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Definitely. Like without maybe treading into like racial stereotypes or anything, like there's definitely like that's culturally, I'm sure that's a big deal. Like for us, like I mean, in general, like for people, right? Like having at least a face-to-face interaction. There's so many like subtle ticks and nuances that like you display to someone when you're having a face-to-face conversation with them that you wouldn't be able to pick up on, like say in an email, right? Like you could maybe write very professional emails like me, but you're actually a psychopath in real life. And like if you actually had a conversation with me, maybe you'd pick up on some of those cues. So like actually having that interaction is super important. And definitely I think for us, so like for better or for worse, there's still a very big, I think, cultural aspect to like face-to-face interactions and like kind of dealing with someone of your own nationality, I guess. Like there's even though obviously it's not true, like we prey on each other all the time. Like, you know, there are bad business deals that happen all the time. There are like bad people in every country and every situation. There it does give, I think, a sense of ease, I guess, if you have a common culture and like even just a common language, right? That you can speak with each other. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big deal.
Well, there's two ways to come at it, right? Like community can be something that you share and that you can work together on. Like this is a culture we are together promoting, but it could also be the lack of barriers, right? Like there's nothing preventing someone from countries around the world from working together and having that same connection or having things they share, but there's barriers in place that there aren't. Like Ellen was saying, like you're down the street from each other, and so there's just so many things you don't have to worry about. Like forget the things you have in common. There's just things you don't not have in common, right? But in either direction is a way you can approach it from. It's like these are the things. Like let's be part of this community together because we're from here, or let's work together and find things else in common. It's easier because we don't have the barriers preventing us from doing that.
Okay, so Ryan, I have two more questions for you. And they're both going to be, I think, a little quick. The first question is, what kind of games do you and the other members of Squeaky Wheel like to play?
That's not a quick question.
Ellen, you said this one would be
now
quick.
I'm just blank. Well, we obviously we have interest in like these like simulation builder like tycoon games. So for me personally, like SimCity was always a huge deal for me. I mentioned before, like I was talking to like some Paradox people, and like they gave me a Steam key for a City Skylines, but I still haven't opened it because I'm so scared of like just losing my life to another city building game.
As someone who has done that recently, they've fallen completely down the City Skylines.
It's definitely a risk. So these days we usually play like, so for when we're playing together, we play like online board games. I've been playing a lot of a game called Splendor lately. I don't know if any of you have played that.
Love that.
I've heard of it. I haven't played it. Oh
yeah, it's a really good.
I know
game.
that one. Yeah.
Kind of. Sometimes I try to step out of like our usual like kind of games we're building, so that you can see if there's any way to cross pollinate or like get ideas from other genres. One of the weird games that I played recently was I forget. I think it's called Rock of Ages. It's very bizarre. You're a boulder, or you're using a boulder as a weapon, and it's like tower defense / a boulder rolling game. It's on the Switch. I was playing actually the sequel. Okay. It's very, very weird. It mixes like a little bit of like art history and like the story is so bizarre. Like you're Atlas, like Atlas carrying the world, and you drop the world and God gets mad at you, and so you pick up this boulder and like you're carrying this boulder across Europe and you're just rolling it around and like crushing armies. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
like a mix between like Getting Over It.
Yeah.
Katamari?
There's definitely
That's what I'm hearing.
a Katamari feel in terms of some of the gameplay and definitely the sense of humor. It's very Katamari. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I would like to play with a rock.
We'll have to do a cross-cultural exchange. We'll have to send you some of the games that our community has produced. And you can send us some of the ones yours has, and we can be very polite in our criticism of each other's games and supportive of their futures in the market.
Totally do that.
Yeah.
So the other question I have for you, Ryan, is where can our listeners find you on the internet?
Nice. This is the whole point of that email that I sent you.
It's time, man. Make it count.
Yeah. Now I'm under a lot of pressure. So. Boy, I don't know where to go first. Our main website is squeakywheel.ph. You can also find us on Twitter and at squeakywheelph. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Sumo. And follow Academia_game on Twitter and Ruinark_game on Twitter as well for the latest updates. And if you are at all interested in being an evil overlord and raining down poison meteors on unsuspecting villagers, then definitely wishlist Ruinark on Steam.
I do want to do that. I want to do that a lot, yes.
Thank you. That was very spur of the moment. That was almost like I was visited by the Ruinark god.
the muse of the one-liners.
Yeah.
The muse of the tagline.
We'll put all those links in the show notes, so listeners who couldn't get their pens out quick enough to scribble it down can get it right from their phone or from nicegames.club.
Well, that's our show. If you liked it, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app and tell all of your friends too. If you're interested in any of the topics and all the games we talked about in the episode, make sure to check out our website, nicegames.club, for more show notes and links to resources, including the ones and the games we talked about on this show and the Studio Squeaky Wheel. So like with playtesting our games, we are always looking for feedback on the podcast. You can go to nicegames.club/feedback to tell us what you think. Get in touch with us on Twitter at nicegamesclub, where Dale tweets game dev resources and pictures of cats, or by email at contact@nicegames.club. As Ryan can attest, we do check that email and we respond. Ask us questions or give us suggestions for topics.
So until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice.
All right, that's the show.
Okay.
The recording's done, so Ryan, you can now tell us what you really think.
That was terrible. I'm never going to do that again. No, this is... it was great. This was great, guys. Thank you so much. I enjoyed myself a lot. Thank you so much for having me on.